Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 155th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 573rd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, January 16th, 2019. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Martin takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
For this week's banner moment, I'm going to celebrate the persistent grit of Joey Brunk on both ends of the court. Think back to Saturday's win over Ohio State. Brunk's post defense against Caleb Wesson was a huge part of Indiana winning that game. And the play that stood out to me most was Brunk's all-out hustle in deflecting not one, but two entry passes on the same possession. Then think back to Wednesday night's loss at Rutgers, a game that featured a lot of casual, passive offense from Indiana, but Brunk was his usual persistent self, battling hard for position inside, and on one possession, not being deterred by getting his shot blocked, and then blocked again, but he still stuck with it and scored the third time. The bottom line is this: Joey Brunk has become unquestionably Indiana's most consistent contributor as a scorer, rebounder, and post defender. Has he been great? No, of course not. But he's been good most nights, and on this Indiana team, that passes for most consistent. Guys like Trace Jackson-Davis and Justin Smith have been fairly consistent producers, and their highs are certainly much higher than Joey's, but they also have unproductive games, and their intensity can wane, whereas Joey's never seems to. It has to be difficult for Archie Miller to enter each game not knowing what he is going to get from so many players on his roster. But I have to think he's become pretty comfortable with what he's going to get from Joey Brunk, and that really means something. Joey wasn't brought to Indiana to be this team's most consistent producer, and frankly, it's a problem for Indiana that he is. Guys with more talent and athleticism need to step up on a more consistent basis if this IU team is going to beat more good teams moving forward. But thank goodness Joey is here. He's a rock for a team that desperately needs one, and a lot of Indiana's close wins would be losses without him. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. Coach is off tonight. I wonder how he's using his free time.
Chasing their wife around the living room or something.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, Mrs. Tonsoni. To my left, he is the Ed Orgeron of Girls U Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Last Good Indiana Shooter fan club, and the world's most fun-loving bracketologist.
Well, it's been a fun week, Jerod. Let me tell you, this is fun. This kind of game is fun. This was fun. All right, well, this was fun.
He is Andy Bottoms, and to be clear, none of those drops were taken during last night's game at Rutgers. Andy, what is your Bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Well, we're back 24 hours later to discuss this, and as I logged in, Ryan was having essentially the same conversation with you that he had on the show at least once, but really probably twice last night. So I'll try to see if I can come up with something different to say other than this team needs better guard play.
I don't know that he's ever left the chair. I think he's just been talking about shooting for 24 straight.
If you had told me he had sat there, everything seemed very familiar. It was like it was really nice. I think the frustrating thing, and I hit on this a little bit in some of my final thoughts last night, is that you feel like you tick days off the calendar and the season gets a week older and you don't know anymore what to expect from this team than you did the week before, because you come back off the Northwestern game with a really strong performance against Ohio State. Yes, there were scoring lulls and some of the things that we've seen, but there was a different intensity, it felt like, and the confidence at times to really work their way out of some of those slow stretches. And then you see such a slow start against Rutgers, but then you see the fight back and they take the lead, and then they give it away by really falling back into bad habits over the last 7-ish minutes of the first half and then the first 3 or 4 minutes of the second half. And you have a 10-minute stretch in the middle of the game where he'd scored once in 16, 18 possessions. And so you still just really don't know what to expect. I think what you said at the beginning speaks to that really well. You don't know what to expect as a team. You don't know what to expect as a player. And as you reflect back on what we spent most of last week's show talking about in terms of shortening the rotation, that becomes really hard to do when you don't know which guys you can actually count on. So where do you start shortening things? Because on any given night. And then last night it just gets into you're kind of throwing darts with throwing Demezi out there, and he takes 4 threes, even though he, didn't play against Ohio State because he was sick and hadn't played in that game. And you're just grasping at things at some point. So it continues to be frustrating. And the more weeks go by that you don't figure out what you can really expect from this team and what its identity is, and whether they can really make meaningful progress in the direction that they need to go by stringing together segments, halves, games of good basketball, the more that you feel like you're not going to get to the point where they figure that out before the season is over.
And to my right, he is a senior writer for The Big Lead, the man whose rants you hate that you love so much, and someone who is clearly now just explicitly angling to be hired as shot doctor by Archie Miller. And frankly, at this point, why the hell not?
That'd be fun to watch.
Yes, it would. Ryan, what is your rant this week?
At least it'd be entertaining.
But would we make more shots?
Well, here's the thing. If we didn't, I'd blame mental toughness. That's the first thing I would go for. So it's a callback to another show, guys. You'll figure it out.
You dumbass.
So look, the Rutgers game is disappointing for so many reasons. That's a tough place to play. And I don't think a lot of people expected Indiana to go in there, especially this version of Indiana, to go in there and win that game. Credit to Rutgers for creating a really tough home environment that teams have just failed at this year. Failed at, when they go in there. But what I would say is, and I said this yesterday, and I'll reiterate it, when you go 2 of 19 from the 3-point line and only score 50 points, you're not going to win on the road in this conference. I'm sorry. You have to make shots. And Indiana, whether they're capable of making shots or not, they're not making them. And that tells me there's something wrong, whether it's a mental thing, whether it's, just not, getting the repetitions they need in practice, not being prepared, not, being comfortable shooting on every aspect or every position on the floor. I don't know what it is, but they're not making shots. And this is the 3rd year in a row that Indiana's 3-point percentage is on pace to be the lowest in program history. Is that the players? Is that the development? Is that whatever it is? I don't care what it is, but something needs to change. And it's on the coaches to figure out what the problem is and to implement the necessary steps to change it. Because you can't do something. If this were a 1-year thing, you'd say, oh man, it's the players. I don't know what it is. But when you have the same thing happening for 3 years and it continues to go lower and lower and lower, and it's preventing you from winning games, if Indiana shoots 3% higher from 3 last year, they probably win 1 more game and get into the NCAA tournament. I mean, you think about that in that respect. They missed the NCAA tournament, and that little of a change, 3% all season, probably puts them in the NCAA tournament. These are things that modern basketball you need to be able to do. And teams are, I tweeted this out earlier, they're weaponizing the 3-point line, and Indiana's getting left in the dust. And I don't know, again, if it's just players who can't shoot, or if it's, they just don't have the mental toughness or whatever, but something needs to be fixed as far as shooting goes in this program, because it's been 3 years of this and we're seeing the same thing over and over, and they're losing winnable games because they can't knock down wide open 3-point shots. That should be a layup for a good guard. It should absolutely be something that when you're open on the perimeter, you should be able to knock that down more often than not. And Indiana had its opportunities against Rutgers because Rutgers was leaving them open and they couldn't knock those down. Couldn't change the momentum, couldn't change the tide, and you lose a game as a result. So it's just something this program and these coaches have to figure out. I know there's a lot of people on edge about Archie Miller, with hot seat talk and all that stuff. He's going to be around for a while, guys. Like, he's not going anywhere after this year, regardless of what the results of this year are. The way his contract is structured, they're not getting rid of him. He's going to be around, which means that we should encourage this coaching staff to improve the areas it's weakest in, instead of just continuing to do the same thing over and over. They need to improve, just like players need to improve, just like players need to develop. Coaches need to develop and recognize their weaknesses and have an honest conversation with themselves about where their shortcomings are and fix those things. So that's where I'm at right now. I know that was a tough place to play. You get a 9-point loss against Rutgers. From the outside looking in, you say, okay, it's a tough place to play. It's on the road in the Big Ten. It's a loss. They played pretty good defense, but you watch that game and there are opportunities to win that game that they just continually fail to win in those situations, and they need to start doing that.
Yep. All right. Well, here's what we are going to talk about this week. We're going to spend a little time looking ahead to IU Nebraska. It's a really, really big game for a lot of reasons, and we will underline those reasons. And then Yes, we're going to talk a little bit more about the shooting, although I promise you that we have a few different angles on that we haven't hit yet. And then your questions, which involve a lot of questions about shooting. So, look, it's what's on Indiana fans' minds after watching their team go 2 for 19, and I don't blame you. So all of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, a quick reminder about tickets. If you are looking for tickets to IU basketball games for the remainder of this season, either home or away, SeatGeek is the place to look. They deliver the best ticket buying experience with their website and their app, and they also will help you identify the best ticket values so that you get the best possible seat for your money. For example, we are all going to be up at the February 8th game against Purdue. As usual, I'm sure that will be a hot ticket, but if you go to SeatGeek and you want to go to that game, you will find the best value. And definitely consider it, because we would love to see you there. But even if you don't go to the game and you can be in Bloomington that weekend, we are going to be doing a post-game show live from Switchyard Brewery after the IU-Purdue game. So definitely come if you can be there. We would love to shake your hand and thank you for being a member of the Assembly Call audience. But getting back to SeatGeek, the best thing is that you get $10 off your first purchase. All you have to do is use the promo code ASSEMBLY. So if you use the URL iutickets.shop, it will take you directly to the IU basketball ticket listing on SeatGeek. All the home games, all the road games are there. That's iutickets.shop, and then use that promo code ASSEMBLY when you purchase, and you will get $10 off. Okay, let's talk about this Nebraska game coming up on Saturday night. 7 o'clock tip, right? 7 o'clock Eastern tip, Andy, Ryan?
Yes, that is correct, I believe.
Yes.
So the Cornhuskers, obviously nothing much was expected of them coming into the season. They have lived up to those low expectations, or lived down to them, I guess. They are ranked 130th in KenPom right now. But this game is in Lincoln, and it is important to note that Nebraska does have home wins over number 15 Iowa. These are KenPom rankings. Number 15 Iowa and number 17 Purdue. So they have beaten top 20 quality teams at home. Rutgers did win there by 17. But they're usually tough at home. Their home court advantage rating is a 4.0, which for context is tied with Mackey Arena for 24th best in the country, one of the KenPom metrics. Assembly Hall is 3.7, which is 68th. So it is a legit home court. They play a lot better there than they do on the road. And you will recall the last time these two teams met, Nebraska took Indiana to overtime. So, Andy, as we look at this, obviously, we remember what Nebraska did to Indiana in that first game, really spread Indiana out. And took advantage of, some things that they saw that Indiana was doing defensively. But what's really important about this game is when you start looking at where the road win's going to come from, even though this is a tough place to play, this is the last game on Indiana's schedule against a team that isn't ranked higher than them in KenPom, which doesn't mean that Indiana can't win any of these games, and they will, and they'll do fine at home. But it does start to put it in perspective that as the season starts to get shorter, opportunities to get wins are going to become less and less. And at some point, Indiana's going to have to take advantage of one. They didn't at Rutgers. This is another opportunity to get one. And if they don't, it does start to become a little bit harder to project where those road wins are going to come from. Not impossible, but harder.
Yeah, when you look at the current net rankings and the team sheet puts the upcoming games on there. So this is the only one that doesn't fall in quad 1 or quad 2. In fact, almost all of the games left fall in quad 1. There's 3 that fall in quad 2, and then this is the only one that is outside of that. Everybody else is in the top 41 of the net coming into today that IU plays.
Boy,
so
that's fun to consider, right?
Oh yeah, really. I mean, the good news is in that scenario is that you really it's hard to take a bad loss following that. You have to win some games, but I think that's why a lot of people think the Big Ten may end up getting a good number of teams in, because there aren't a whole lot of bad losses to be had. And if the standings shake out like KenPom or most sites would project, where you've got a whole bunch of teams anywhere between 9 and 11 and 11 and 9. You've got a bunch of teams with quality wins and not a lot of bad losses. But yeah, this is if there's one that you feel like IU should get, this would have to be it. Based on everything that's out there. The other lower rated, if you will, away games are at Penn State, where IU hasn't typically played particularly well, although they've won some. At Minnesota, don't need to discuss that one. At Illinois, IU's had some success there. At Purdue, haven't had any success, and at Michigan, where they haven't played particularly well. And at Ohio State's the other one. So I mean, not exactly a whole lot of the gap between how winnable
You're not
this
giving
game
us
is
hope,
and
Andy.
Well, I didn't think that was the purpose of this segment. We're going to talk about shooting in the next part. So I mean, what are we? I mean, is that what we're doing
Can I
here?
throw out a controversial
We're peddling hope. I don't know.
Yeah.
The barn. not as intimidating as it used to be. We've played better there in recent years. I'm not quite as scared of the barn. Now remind me of this in a few
I am
weeks.
so not
Go up there.
confident about
I
going
remember
to the
last
barn.
year. I remember
Thank you.
last year.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. Anyway,
I remember that.
But yeah, so I mean, so back to this game. I mean, it really is by a pretty wide margin the most winnable of the road games there, and you give yourself a little bit of leeway, I guess, if you feel like finishing 10 in the league is good enough, and it probably is at this point. It gives you at least a little bit of leeway to drop a home game, I guess. Not that you want to do that, but gives you a little something there because IU has yet to win a road game. They only they didn't play any in the non-conference, so you don't have any true road wins on there. That's going to be a seeding issue at the very least if you get in without one of those. So it is pretty important for sure.
And for a team, Ryan, just psychologically, for a team that doesn't always seem to really play well when it's pressing, to get that monkey off your back and get that first Big Ten road win, I think would be important, just so it doesn't become a thing. Where it's like, man, we just can't win on the road. Like, to get one, get off the schneid. Now you start to feel better.
Get the
about
monkey
your
off your back.
Another one. And that's, again, but the reason we wanted to underscore this is, it does look very inviting. 130th ranked Nebraska. They're not very good, but it is a tough venue, and they've beaten good teams in there. So it's not like Indiana can waltz in. They're going to have to deliver by far their best performance on the road and one of their best performances of the season to do it, because that's just what playing on the road in the Big Ten is like this year. But at some point, coming close, improvement on the road isn't going to be enough. They're going to have to get one of these.
They're going to have to get one
Saturday.
No, and sorry, I was just I think that definitely they're going to have to play really good basketball. The one thing we saw is after they played badly against Northwestern, they bounced back and played pretty decent basketball against Ohio State. I think that was a pretty good performance against Ohio State. You got to hope for the same thing here, and but the thing is that they're not going to have the crowd backing them like they did against Ohio State when things didn't go well. This is, I think, a situation where this team just has to come together. And it seems like I hate saying this about these guys because they seem like a good group of kids, but they seem very mentally fragile. And if things don't go well, they don't deal well with things not going well. And so they're going to have to get off to a good start. They bounced back against Rutgers after that poor early start, but they also had a poor early start. There's that other, they turned the ball over 3 times stupidly, took some bad shots, and all of a sudden you're down 12-0. You're in a 12-0 hole before the game's even started, really. And you have to use a timeout early that you're not going to get back later. And they can't.
You have no margin for error for the
exactly. And starting out down 12-0, I understand this is not how basketball works, but they wound up losing by 9 and they started out down 12-0. They won the rest of the game. And I know it's not a 1-to-1 thing, but still you dug yourself in such a hole that it doesn't matter what you do the rest of the game. You're so far behind, and they got back and they took a lead. But, if it had been a 3-0 hole or a 6-0 hole, maybe that comeback wouldn't have taken so much out of them. And, there's so many ways to look at this. You can't put yourself that far down early on. They did it at Wisconsin and never recovered. So it was nice to see an actual comeback against Rutgers, but I just think this team needs to come out of the gate hot to have a chance to win. And I don't know what it is about the way they start games. We've seen it over the last couple of years. It hasn't been as big a problem this year, but poor starts were a big thing the last 2 years. And, you can't have one of those in a game you need to win. This is the road game. If you're looking at, I'm not saying it's a must win because that's always a tough thing to say, but if you're looking at the remaining road games, as Andy just did, this is the one you got to get. If you're going to get one, this would appear to be that one. And you're not playing a great team. And, as you said, it's a team Rutgers crushed at home. And so, you got to feel like you got to get this one. And Indiana did not play well against Nebraska or that style when they went to Assembly Hall and were, wound up pulling it out in overtime, but didn't look great. It was a very discouraging, as discouraging as wins can be. It was a very discouraging win. So hopefully, maybe it's a bad stylistic matchup or whatever, but hopefully they can figure this out and dig themselves out of this road hole they've been in.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was going to bring up. It does present some matchup challenges. Nebraska plays really small, very perimeter oriented, which is not where IU has a ton of depth. It really becomes a game where you're going to have to get good performances from Jerome Hunter or Demezi. Justin Smith has to play well because they really spread you out. They got a handful of baskets on back cuts. They're going to run ball screens and certainly I would expect to do some of the same things that Rutgers did. And the other thing they do while they play really fast from a tempo standpoint is that they don't focus on offensive rebounding. They really just want to get back, and they don't turn the ball over a lot. They're in the top 10 in turnover rate. So for a team like IU who wants to get and needs to get baskets in transition, they do a fairly good job limiting that, even though they play quick, because they're not giving you runouts off of turnovers, and they're not going after offensive rebounds really at all. And they'll force IU to execute in the half court. And there were times in the first matchup when they really did that. And they have to make Nebraska pay with a guy like Trace, because they don't have a clear matchup for him. If you're playing him and Joey, you can't have these stretches where they're not able to get the ball inside. Because otherwise you're putting yourself at a disadvantage on the defensive end by having him try to check one of their perimeter players and then not make it up for it on the other end by really making them pay. Because if you can get some guys into foul trouble, that's really where it could pay dividends, because they're not deep at all. They play their starters a ton of minutes, except for the post guys, largely split time, but at least 3 of the perimeter players play a pretty high percentage of minutes. So fouls will be a big factor, I think. And if IU can get the ball inside, get to the line early, that would bode well.
Yeah, and you got to get a good game out of Rob Finney, defensively and offensively. This has to be his best game, I think, quite frankly. This has to be his best game, because you got to control the tempo, control the offense, get the ball inside, make sure they're pounding it inside. He's probably going to have to hit a couple threes for you, and then he's going to have to play good defense.
I mean, he's got to be that guy every night. Like,
I know,
but
I mean, I'm saying he's got to step up. You know, this is the one he's got to step up on. You know, and you know, maybe even Devontae Green's got to knock down some shots for you to get out of this one. No more 2 and 19 stuff.
No. All right. Well, speaking of that, coming up, let's talk about shooting. Why are we not making shots in games? What can be done about it this year? And what does Archie Miller's history suggest about his ability or lack thereof to develop shooters? We're going to talk about all that. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Hello to everybody watching live. Good to see you all. I see that the women's team did not have a good evening.
Yeah,
lost in overtime.
Yeah.
From the few descriptions, it sounds like that 2014 Penn State game where we just gave away like a 13-point lead in 30 seconds.
Why'd you have to bring that up, Jared?
Yeah, I think they started. It seemed like they started slow, then got back in the lead, and then lost in overtime.
Hey, Andy, I got to do something real quick, so you entertain everybody.
I'll just vamp. That's exciting. All right. Yeah, this will be really fun. This is my chance to talk on the show while Ryan's not talking about how much we need to get to pay somebody to coach shooting. So that's definitely exciting. This would also be a good time for me to actually have the chat open so that if anybody had comments or questions, I could address those. But alas, here we are. I'm going to bow out during the segment about the shooting. So you guys took your break now, but I'll be taking mine during that portion of the discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk shooting here.
How about those Jordan Geronimo dunks, by the way?
Dude.
Those are nice.
As Jeremy Price said on Twitter, now can he just take off from outside the 3-point line?
Does that count as a 3-point line? If you release it before the rim, that counts as a 3, I'd assume.
I think so, yeah. If you don't land on the ground.
You can't touch the rim probably, but I think you can.
You might be able to. I don't know. We'll never know.
Oh, Brian too said it's the Bottoms Up Eagles podcast. Look at that. Oh. That'd be a good show. You and my brother-in-law can talk Eagles football.
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear my thoughts on the Eagles receiving core at this point.
Okay, here's a question for you: what's better, Indiana shooting or the Eagles receivers?
Eagles receivers.
Eagles
receivers. At least they show up sometimes.
Hey,
I know.
Hey, our shooters have showed up sometimes too.
I'm teasing.
If tight ends can be included in that, then I would say the Eagles receiving core.
Yeah.
That would be like if you add Jerome Hunter and Race Thompson.
Without Ertz and Goddard, it becomes a close call.
Yeah, do they even have receivers without Ertz?
Not a big Nelly Aguilar fan, huh? There, Andy.
No, I like players who can catch the ball.
Fight on, Nelly.
Okay. Hank says Eagles receivers without a doubt. Okay, well.
The fact that we even have to have that discussion is the problem.
You can't really. It's difficult to ask after last night. I mean,
it's the third straight year we have to find creative, entertaining ways to talk about bad shootings because we have. I should have just copied the same run sheet from last year when we had this conversation about why can't Indiana shoot.
Well, that was the thing. Yeah, guys, just a behind the scenes thing. Jerod, as we're texting, I said, like, hey, can you get the Dayton numbers? I'm just curious. Because I haven't seen them in a while. I'm just curious what they were. He's like, yeah, we've discussed that before. I'm like, we need to discuss it again. It's what people want to talk about. All right.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Here we go. So yeah, let's try to find like some new angles. So if either one of you feels like the conversation is going down the road that we went down last night, let's just veer off.
Yeah.
And go in a different direction. No one wants to hear that. Although I thought Coach and Ryan, I thought there was a chance that, I don't know.
What, that I'm going to reach, that he was going to reach through the.
They would come to blows? Is that what you were thinking?
Got pretty intense there for a second. Yeah. If that
the funny thing is, and I told people.
And then Megan is online giving me a hard time that I'm just like glazing over while they're talking about it. I definitely was the second time. Once we got back into it, I was like, yeah. we've heard this before.
Yeah.
I think Coach, like when he's hosting, like he feels the power. Like he's a little bit more likely to interrupt and talk over people.
Well, it was funny because I was telling people in the
chat, why Ryan doesn't host? Is because he would be so much more compelled to interrupt people than he already is now. Yeah. I mean,
you guys don't want to give.
Well, no. See, when you host,
I can't even imagine
to other people.
I can't even imagine a world like that.
It would just be. It would be the Ryan Phillips podcast.
Yeah, it would be 50 minutes in. The banner moment would be done.
Jerod Morris and Andy Bottoms.
Coach said he wanted to put you on the end line.
Oh, Coach!
I could really see you guys butting heads. Like if he had coached you.
Oh
in high
yeah,
school basketball.
Are you kidding me? Anybody who coached me was going to butt heads with me. Come on, let's be real.
Okay.
I had technical fouls aplenty. I did not get along with officials either.
Did you get technical fouls in high school?
Oh yeah, I think I set our school record in 1 year.
It's nice. That is nice.
Yeah, we'll tell those stories someday. Not tonight, but we'll tell. I'll
just like talking back to refs or getting into it with the other team.
Refs mostly.
Like a Rasheed Wallace situation? Is that what we?
I was very well. This will shock you, but I was very sarcastic with officials.
Really?
And shockingly, high school
knock
officials
me over with a feather. That's
don't like that. Amazingly. There was one time, I will tell this before we get into this segment. There was one time I was at a JV tournament in an empty gym. And it was like, because we had like the 9 a.m. game or whatever. My buddy, if you've met, my buddy Gabe was there. He hung out the night before and he went to the game, and it was him and my mom in our fan section. And then like the other people had a bunch of fans. And the official, like I got shoved on one play as I was shooting, like out of bounds, fell over. So I ran back down the other. What I do, I fouled the guy going up for a layup, and I turned around to the official and I said, "Were you blind on the other end?" And got a technical. And all I heard in the entire gym was my mom's voice, and it was, "Oh, Ryan!" And it echoed around the gym. And then the only other sound in the gym was my buddy Gabe just dying laughing, like as loud as he could possibly laugh. Just dying laughing. So that was.
Can your mom bring some tiramisu?
She can try. Yeah, she can try. Hilarious. Just the only sound in the gym is my mom's voice echoing around the gym.
That's great. We'll have to ask her about this story on February 8th.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's get into this.
That's funny. Okay, here we go. All right.
Hi, this is James Blackman Jr. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call. Join Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, James. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mobbers during our unedited live broadcasts, or watch those replays and see all the between segment banner, like the story that Ryan just told, which was really entertaining, check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. All right, I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. And we're going to talk about shooting. Now, I want to start this off Who's the jackass that all offseason tried to tell everybody it'll be okay? Juwan and Romeo are gone. Now all the shots will be spread around to better shooters and our percentage will go up. Maybe we won't be a high-volume team, but we'll certainly be a high-efficiency team. What jackass podcaster said that all offseason?
Definitely nobody on this show.
I think that's Jerod
Nobody
Morris.
on this show.
That might be Jerod Morris, actually.
Yeah, it was. It was. And I still, I stand by those thoughts because the process was right. The results so far have not been good. So let's try to talk about why and also kind of take a step back, bigger picture, because Ryan, on last night's show with Coach, you guys were kind of, going back and forth on what are some of the reasons for this. And I sense from Indiana fans and I read from Indiana fans that they're starting to get really nervous that an Archie Miller coach team is just never going to make threes and that he just doesn't know how to do it. And there's some data that I think that is relatively persuasive in one direction that we'll get to. But, we got several questions about this. Bill asked, why aren't our best shooters, who can shoot in practice according to Archie, regularly hitting the deep ball during gameplay? And, one thing to me, when you look at this, is it's kind of clear that even in a best-case scenario, we have okay shooters, right? We don't have great shooters. We have decent shooters, okay? So when they're comfortable, they can make shots. And the difference between an okay shooter and a great shooter, like James Blackman Jr., who opened up this segment, for all of his faults as a player, he was a great shooter. Great shooters can make shots in any situation. Decent shooters kind of need things to be right for them to be making shots. And so when you look at what our team has done so far, these numbers are mind-boggling. We've played 5 games away from home this year. We are 18 for 89 from downtown. That is 20.2%.
That includes
at home.
It's the neutral court games too, right?
That includes the neutral court games.
Okay. All away from home. Got it. Okay.
Yes. At home, we are 67 for 197, 34%, which we would all take, which sounds pretty good. And in 2 home games against top 20 defenses, Florida State and Ohio State, we're 13 for 27. That's 48%. So I agree with Archie when he says we have guys who can make shots, but it is clear these guys are not making shots. And so I think, we don't have enough creators on offense who can draw the defense and get guys good looks and rhythm. Opposing defenses have really started to clog the paint, which doesn't allow us to play our inside-out game. We have a hard enough time just getting the ball into the post, let alone getting it into the post and then getting a kick out back. Why did those shots fall at the beginning of the Ohio State game? Because we played inside-out from Trace to Rob. And then, the other thing is when the offense is a slog, players aren't playing free and light. Everything is tight, and you can't shoot and make shots that way. And so that to me, to answer that question from Bill, I do think we have some guys capable of making shots. Rob and Devontae and Al. They're not great shooters, but they're good. They're good enough to give Indiana passable three-point shooting. But when the offense is having all the problems that it is, it's hurting those guys, and obviously no one else has stepped up to be a good enough shooter to be a credible threat and help raise that percentage. So as we look at this year's team, are there any other reasons why you guys think these guys this year are just really struggling? I feel like we've probably exhausted most of them, but just on the subject of this year's team, is there anything else that you guys can see that if it improves, the shooting could get better, or other reasons why these guys are struggling and shooting worse than they should be?
I think one of the problems for sure is just there's a lot of poor footwork on the shots. And so when you talk about can these guys make shots, I think so, but I also think that there's a lot of stuff in there where they're not doing the right things. So it's like they're capable of making shots if conditions are perfect, if it's kicked out, if they're stepping into it, if they're leaning forward. And this is why I advocated for somebody to come in who specializes in, helping you develop a shooter. The reason why is, if you can make a shot from the top of the key, technically you should be able to make a shot from the corner. You should be able to make a shot from the wing, but you're seeing guys, Rob, usually when he makes them, and Rob Finney makes them, he's at the top of the key or maybe a little bit off. He should be able to make that shot from the corner too. And the reason that guys shoot differently on different parts of the floor is where they're receiving the pass, how they're receiving the pass. You get a pass from your right side and you catch it and you have to square up, as you're kind of leaning left, having catch the pass and swing through, you got to make sure to square your shoulders and do all those things. And so I just feel like guys have their spots on the floor, and if they don't get the shot there, it's not going down. And they have these very small comfort zones where it has to be a pass from the inside coming out and shooting it. The shots should kind of be the same no matter where you are on the floor and how you're receiving the pass. It's more about the distance and your release. It shouldn't be about, how you're catching it, where you're catching it, all that. I know all of that plays a factor, but you shouldn't have to boil up the exact perfect combination of circumstances to get you to make a shot. Can Rob Finney hit a 3-pointer when he catches it and steps into it and has that perfect situation? Of course. Can Devontae Green catch and shoot a 3? Absolutely he can. Can Al Durham? Yes. The problem is it feels like with each of those guys, it has to be a very specific circumstance for them to be in their comfort zone shooting a 3. And that's what worries me. These guys need to be developed in a way that where they can make it from everywhere and know that if you catch it in the corner, you got to square your shoulder before you shoot, as opposed to swinging through and kind of leaning back and all that. So I don't want to get too technical with it, but it's a situation where they should be able to have the same mechanics no matter where they are on the floor. They should be able to have the same follow through regardless of where they are on the floor. Footwork should be the same. And that's why I was saying that I thought that they need to bring somebody in. So yes, technically they can shoot, but it just feels like you've narrowed the range of ways in which they can make them. And that is what's concerning.
And the other thing to remember too is Al, Devontae, and Rob are not the big problem. I mean, they are not what's dragging down the percentage.
But they're the ones you rely on, and then they each will have games where it's just...
They are. And they were the problem against Rutgers, to be fair. They were the guys taking most of the shots, and they missed them. But the guys really dragging down the percentage are Demezi and Jerome, who I think combined are shooting like 19%, and Justin Smith, who hasn't developed. So, if you can get anything out of those guys, it'll help. And maybe, at some point you start to... like the Rutgers game, give a higher percentage of the shots to the guys who have proven they can make them. But that was just a game with the tough physical defense of Rutgers being on the road. Those guys do have percentages, but they were built at home, and a lot of it was built against lesser competition. They have yet to prove they can do it away from home, which they need to do. Andy?
Yeah, I think this came up on the show last night. I think it wasn't me. It was Ryan or Coach that brought this up. But the part of it is lineup construction, and not just the fact that you are consistently playing 3 guys who are kind of non-shooters in Joey, Trace, and Justin Smith, but it's also that you have these 2 post players. So if a guy goes to drive, I mean, nobody on this team is really a guy who's going to make pull-up threes or is a good shooter off the dribble. I would imagine the synergy numbers are not good in that regard. And so you're really resigned to creating catch and shoot situations, which if you don't get the ball in through the post and can't swing it that way, the only other way that you can really do that is by getting people to drive. Well, if you drive, there's built-in help in the lane. Nobody has to help off of the shooter anyway, even if they really respected the shooter, because there's already 2 guys right in the lane that are guarding Trace and Joey or some combination thereof. So I think it just becomes you can't create any space that way. And there was a play in, I think it was the Ohio State game. Justin almost drove kind of horizontally across the court and actually dribbled almost toward, I think it was Rob who made the shot, and Rob's got helped off of him and he relocated. It's not necessarily something that I think you can do a ton of, but to try to get somebody downhill to think you're going to pitch it back out to somebody or throw it to somebody in the corner, like that's just not happening, because nobody has to help off those shooters, because you've got 2 defenders at minimum already right in the lane. So I don't know how you change some of that stuff. It really has to become screening at that point, where you're able to get guys open off of, and catch and shoot off of screens, because driving and kicking and really getting the ball into the post is not the way they're able to create shots. But you also have guys who, as you said, aren't necessarily great creators for others, and they certainly aren't guys that can create their own shots.
Yeah.
Devontae at times will attempt to do that with mixed results, obviously. But really otherwise that they're not dribbling to look to create shots for themselves, and they're not really functioning in a way that the dribbling creates shots for others either.
So Coach makes a good point in the chat. He said the one thing I would do if I was ever head coach again is let guys play free on offense. Give me defense and then go and shoot. Freedom allows for confidence. And I do think this team feels overcoached. We've talked about this, especially offensively. Overcoached, tight. It's like they're not playing basketball. They're trying to do what is these
a mechanical
thing. Yeah. Mechanical offense.
Yeah, it's like you're checking the box of I did this. Yeah. So now I move on to the next thing. It's not a to-do list. It's a
it's like station to station offense. Yeah. And except for the fact when they go to the check mark where it says throw it into the post no matter what, and then they just don't do that. That we need to get a little better at. But, I think and a lot of Indiana fans see this. Indiana fans know what good offense looks like. And I think this leads to people.
After so many years, how do they? I'm just kidding.
Well, but this does lead, I think, to Indiana fans getting a little bit nervous. Like, is this how it's always going to be if Archie Miller's our coach? Can Archie Miller coach three-point shooting? Does he realize that the game has changed? Can he coach shooters? And so, we know what his track record is at Indiana, and it's not good. But, I did want to go back and just see what happened at Dayton. Like, is there something that happened at Dayton where obviously they had some success that would be instructive? And, I wasn't sure what I would find, although we have talked about the three-point numbers before, Ryan. 3 of his 6 seasons at Dayton, they shot 37.7% or better. Like, how insane does that number look after the last few seasons? 37%. In each of those seasons, it was 54th or better in the country. So it was, essentially, it was really, really good. Not quite elite, but really, really good.
If this team was top 100 in the country in three-point shooting, we'd be looking at a top 5 in the Big Ten potentially. Like
top 150. Shoot.
I mean, because of the other boxes checks. Like you look at the defense has clearly gotten better, and they've got such a force inside. If they could hit shots, it would change.
And they were decent in volume. This, his Indiana program hasn't taken many threes. At Dayton, 5 of the 6 seasons, they were average or above in 3 points attempted. So they utilized the 3-point shot at Dayton. Now, why was that? Well, they had a lot of different guys who could create, played a smaller lineup, had a guy like Scoochie Smith that could direct the offense. These are things he hasn't had yet at Indiana. The other question that we've talked about is, does this guy have any clue how to develop a shooter? Because no one seems like they've gotten better, and this is coming on the heels of a program where that was obviously very important under the previous coach. Well, you look at some of the most important guys Archie had at Dayton. Devin Oliver went from 21.2% as a sophomore to 40% as a senior. Scoochie Smith started out 27% as a freshman, was 38% every single year after that. Really, absurdly consistent.
Big jump.
Kyle Davis, 16.7% as a freshman to 29.7%. That was actually 39.7% as a senior. It was a typo. Jordan Siebert and Charles Cook transferred. Both guys saw their percentages jump 8 to 9 percentage points. So there were only a couple of guys in his history at Dayton, of guys that were in his program for several years, that were moderate volume 3-point shooters that didn't get better. Now, again, part of that I think is because the offense was constructed differently and it was more conducive to kind of playing a style that's going to lead to 3-pointers. But clearly, guys got better. So I don't know if there was an assistant, not named Tom Ostrom, that was on that staff that didn't come over. If there's just something with the guys that he inherited, and look, Al Durham has improved, and Devontae Green has basically stayed about the same, but it's some of the younger guys that we haven't seen that development from. So I say this simply to say, I don't think Archie Miller got this job and got to this point not knowing how to develop shooting.
And he clearly knows the importance of the 3-point line because he talks about it all the time.
So for whatever reason, there's something, I don't know if it's systemic yet. It's only 2.5 seasons in, but there's a disconnect between what was happening at Dayton and the way those rosters were built and what's going on here at Indiana. Maybe it's something that will cycle out, after, a couple more years when he's had his chance, but he also doesn't have a great track record yet of bringing in new shooters. So, and the other thing to remember...
To his defense, real quick on that, because people have asked me about this. They've said, well, he's not recruiting the right guys, and all this. It's like they've gone after some shooters. They've just missed, and you're gonna miss in recruiting. It happens. The key is that you're gonna win. You hit more than you miss. That's really what you're looking for. You're never gonna be perfect. They've really rolled snake eyes on shooters. I mean, they really have. They've gone after shooters, guys who could really impact the game, who could really be impacting this team right now, and just missed. Kids pick another school for whatever. You can recruit a guy as perfectly as possible and have him pick another school. That happens. So I think people, when you say recruiting, yeah, obviously they're trying to recruit the best players and everything. You're going to miss sometimes. So I think that has to be, talked about as well, that you're never going to be perfect at recruiting.
Yeah, and I don't want to use these numbers to excuse what's happened at Indiana. It doesn't. This is his job, and he's had 2.5 years, and it should be better, and it needs to be better. But at least when you look at it, it's not like, oh, man, they're shooting at Dayton suck too. It got better for those players at Dayton, And so at least there's a track record of it. And the last thing I'll say, Andy, just as a reality check, is sometimes this can take a little time. Tom Crean's first 2 teams at Georgia, they're not shooting the 3 very well. And some of his players that were holdovers, they're shooting worse from 3-point range this year than they were last year. It can take a little while to put a system in, and I just use that as an example because it's the coach who was here previously that's known for developing shooting. So it doesn't ease the frustration of the moment, but it does at least give me a little bit more hope than maybe I had when we were 0 for 14 against Rutgers, that this coach understands what he's doing on some level. But for whatever reason, this staff, this program, this collection of individuals hasn't been able to get it done.
Yeah, I don't know that they just look uncomfortable as much as anything. And we talked about this on the show last night, that you just see different. Rob was the guy that I mentioned a couple of times last night. He leaves one short at front rims it. The next one is way long. And you could tell he just put more on the shot. And so it isn't a consistent rhythm of, I'm taking the same shot every time. They're just look uncomfortable and trying to guide the ball in the basket and trying to make little tweaks on the fly based on the last shot that they took and how that shot looked to try to figure out what to do with the next one, thinking that it'll go in. And so while you can sit in a gym and do things in practice and drills and whatever, and you can be really repetitive with your motion, these guys in games don't have the confidence to do it. And then they start, again, kind of tinkering, if you will, by trying to make these small adjustments, but not based on like doing something wrong, just based on the result of the shot prior. And so they just get in these situations. But like I said, they just look uncomfortable shooting the ball because really, for as much as the Ohio State game, there was a lot of talk about how the quality of the 3-point shots, the actions that they came off of and things like that, which was 100% correct, that the vast majority of those were off of inside out plays and really putting guys in comfortable positions to shoot. But they got just as many wide open looks against Rutgers. Some of them were forced. Some of them were end of shot clock situations. But I think if you would go back and look, I mean, there's some of them that guys are just wide open. And I don't even feel like Rutgers was closing out on some guys particularly hard because, again, I think those are the shots that teams want IU to take, so they're willing to do it. And if you can't be comfortable in that scenario, taking a wide open shot where you're really not getting closed out hard, you saw Jerome for one of the first times all year hesitate. I think he ended up putting the ball on the floor on the, during the game where he had a wide open 3 at the top of the key, passed it up, passed it to somebody. He got it back, thought about it again, didn't take it. Like for the majority of the games that he's been in, the one thing that you count on was if he was open, the shot was going up.
Yeah.
And that's, for a guy like him, that might be the best thing for him to do is to play free, like you were talking about. But even a guy like him who was not hesitant at all to shoot is now hesitant. And it's just a lack of comfort. And I don't know how you instill that, because until it happens in a game, it's not, you can shoot as many and make as many in practice as you want, I feel like. But until you get to a point where you're seeing him go through the rim in a game, that's what gives you the confidence. And that's the confidence that these guys just don't have right now.
Andy's right. I mean, you got to make them in games to feel that confidence. I agree. But for some of these guys, they'll make them in games and that confidence doesn't translate. It doesn't. Rob was great against Ohio State, comes into last night, 1 of 6, and was, as he said, he was perfect, described it perfectly, trying to guide the ball into the basket as opposed to just snapping your wrist off and snapping that shot off. He's trying to push it a little more or hold it back a bit. I mean, it's a perfect description. I'll give you that, Andy. That was absolutely great. Trying to guide it into the basket is a great way to put it. The last thing I'll mention is, we talk about developing shooters and all that stuff. That happens in the off season. I mean, so it's not like you're going to develop a shooter midseason. You can work and tinker with things and maybe help a guy out of a slump during a season because he's doing something mechanically that's wrong. And you just, it's like a baseball player with their swing. They get into holes where they're, doing the wrong thing, and you straighten it out, watch some video, whatever. But you develop a good shooter in the off season, and it's with work in the off season. So, I mean, I'm not saying nobody can get better this year, but that's something that has to happen in the off season. You create shooters in the off season with drills and with work, and partially it's on the players to show up and shoot, grab a manager and get to the gym and shoot in your free time. And guys like Victor Oladipo turned himself into a good shooter. I mean, he got the drills and he went and did it, and he worked, and his workouts were legendary, and he became a really good shooter from a guy who was shooting air balls as a freshman. So I think that it's something that these guys also have to be dedicated to it. So it's not just on the coaching staff. It's also on the players to want to have that deep down desire to create themselves, to turn themselves into that offensive weapon that can really change a game. But yeah, I think Andy's right that they do need to see some go down in games, but even when they have seen them go down in games, it seems like it doesn't translate one game to the next.
Yeah. Very well said. All right. Well, that was our conversation on shooting. We got a couple questions about it here coming up in our final segment, so we will talk a little bit more about it, plus some other topics, too, that you guys sent in. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. We'll answer your questions next. You know, the other thing that's interesting to remember, too, I was going back through and just looking at, the recruiting scouting reports of some guys just to see, because Al was, I just took excerpts from it. Al Durham needs to work on being a consistent shooter. Devontae Green, he's historically been a streaky shooter and scorer with suspect shot selection. Rob Finnessy needs to improve consistency of his shooting. It's not bad, but it needs to improve in order to become a consistent threat at the next level. All of these things check out. And all those guys have actually probably overperformed those descriptions just a tad.
I would agree.
Then you look at Jerome Hunter. Hunter is most dangerous behind the arc and is especially dependable from a stationary position in a catch-and-shoot scenario. Demezy Anderson, known as a shooter. Like that, and
Jerome,
we'll get to that in this segment, but those two guys really holding back the percentage. Like, for the way that Archie has constructed this roster, he had to hit on at least one of those guys being a really good shooter, and they haven't.
I will say, though, Archie mentioned this in his radio show this week. He said, look, Jerome took a year away from basketball, and he's relearning how to play basketball. And Coach and I talked about it last night. You see Jerome shoot, you're like, that's a shooter. Like his body.
That guy's a scorer.
He is. But I think that when he rises up to shoot, you're like, that's a good looking shot. Now he's releasing it a little early or a little late or little things that are making it, but he's almost always online. And it's just too long, too short, whatever. But you look at that guy when he rises up and you have a confidence that it's going to work out. That's why you've been saying for weeks, like he's going to have a game where it hits.
It's going to happen. It's still going to happen.
Look at that guy play and you're like, all right, that guy knows what he's doing. And so, I think that you got to go easy on Jerome because essentially, as Archie keeps saying, he's a true freshman. He didn't play last year. He didn't practice. He didn't play. He didn't do anything last year. So, taking a year away from basketball, you do have to kind of relearn the game a bit. You have to relearn your timing, even like the finest, millisecond type things. You got to relearn those that come naturally. But you're right. I mean, that was a guy we were all counting on being able to shoot. But we also, I think, in our evaluations of him, forgot he didn't play for a year. Didn't practice for a year.
I think most people have been
patient
with him. It's just a fact of life, the way that the way that it does just kind of suck for Archie. Like he's definitely had some bad luck, no question about it, with some of those injuries and stuff. But hey, Race Thompson's 3 for 7 from downtown.
He shoots confidently. I mean, it's not always a smart thing, but he shoots confidently, and he could shoot in high school. There was a guy who shot, 18-footers in high school. He wasn't necessarily nailing the 3-pointers, but you go back and look at his high school film. He's shooting jumpers. It's not a bad looking shot. He shoots it confidently. I don't want him shooting 4 in a game, but if he gets one and they're leaving him 7 feet,
run some pick and pops with him.
Take it.
Yeah. All right.
Just make sure it's right in front of the other team's bench so he can turn around.
Yeah.
That was great.
Shut up.
That was great. All right, so we got a lot of questions here. Which are there any that you guys particularly like? Oh, okay. I didn't
read any of them ahead of time, so let me.
You should get the recruit one.
No.
You should.
I'm going to do the recruit one and then Lee's. We'll hit those two this segment, and then we'll hit some at the end.
Cool.
I do want to do the recruit one just so we can hit that real quick. I feel like we do it every other show probably, but it's worth hitting again. Okay, let's do this. Here we go. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go.
This is Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Well, sorry, Ethan. Ryan is here tonight. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU News Roundup even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to Assembly Call to get that. Time now for our mailbag. All of these questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community at assemblycall.com/community. And just kind of piggybacking on that last segment, Phil wants to know, does the next recruiting class have a shooter/scorer? And we've gone through this before, Andy, but Trey Galloway, known as kind of an okay shooter, but is having some issues with his wrists again this season that are a little bit worrisome, but he kind of projects as an okay shooter. Anthony Leal, known as a good shooter, but I would say more Robert Johnson than James Blackman Jr., like more good to really good, not that elite type guy.
I think he has the potential. I think he has the potential, if developed properly, to get to that sort of. I don't know about elite, but he has.
Yeah, he's not that guy yet. He's not Hulls or Blackman,
right?
But he's
right. No, he has the chance to get to be a really good, consistent shooter. I think.
And Jordan Geronimo, he's a solid shooter with potential. Has good form and release. We'll see how he develops, but obviously
he hasn't had to take that. I mean, throughout it, because of his how athletic he is, he hasn't had to take that many. Because why take a shot? You're shooting 35% when you could just drive in and throw down a hammer dunk like he did last night.
Yeah. Andy, do you have any thoughts on these gentlemen?
No, I mean, I think Leal is the one, if you're looking for somebody who might be able to come and step in next year and be a guy that could help fill that void, he's the one that would be the most ready to do that immediately, which lines up with what you described. But it's definitely not none of those guys is elite knockdown shooter that is the quick fix to what is ailing this team for this year and last.
No, but Trey will help create shots. I mean, he's a guy he's a good passer, maybe doesn't have elite quickness, but better quickness than you might think, and can actually drive to create for folks. So, and I think, assuming he's healthy, he'll be ready to play early. So yes, we'll see, how those guys actually play when they get here, but that's kind of what the scouting report is on them currently. And then we got this question.
Is Galloway back yet? I know he was hurt with that wrist injury.
I think he's playing now, but just playing hurt.
He was out for a couple weeks in December, I think.
He is a tough dude, man.
Yeah.
He is going to definitely increase the toughness and leadership.
He was averaging like 25. He was averaging like 25 points, eight rebounds, and 6 assists or something like that when he got hurt. So he's having quite the year.
Ty Jerome. Poor man's Ty Jerome. This question from Lee. Would severely lowering our expectations for the team help our perceptions about them? I don't think so, but I invite your comments. This has been a long 3 years. Andy, I would just say quickly no, but I guess it depends on what your expectations were. My expectations for this team were, compete 6th, 7th, somewhere, 5th maybe in the Big Ten, just depending on how those records fall out, and make the NCAA tournament. That to me was the bar. I think that should still be the bar. And I think if your expectations are much, much higher than that, then maybe you need to reset them. But I think if you have those expectations, those absolutely should stay, and this team should be measured against them.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I felt like competing for an NCAA tournament spot was the expectation for this year, given what was lost, the new guys coming in trying to figure all that out. So I would agree that if expectations were higher than that, and even if they rose higher than that based on the way that this season started, I think that's probably an expectation issue. But otherwise, yeah, I don't think you move the goalpost on yourself to make yourself feel better that things aren't as bad as they seem, because what you ultimately want to see is the growth and the laying of the foundation of the effort and what's kind of required on a night in and night out basis. And I think that's what's frustrating to people, is that you still don't know what the identity of this team is going to be. And you can't count on the requisite level of effort and hustle from experienced guys on a night in and night out basis. And I think that's what's frustrating. And that to me should always be the expectation, regardless of what that leads to from a postseason perspective.
Ryan, are you lowering expectations?
No, I think that the expectations at Indiana you can't lower them. I mean, there's a, you expect a down year sometimes if you have a big senior class big senior class plus a leader who goes pro. I mean, you have to adjust down what you expect, but it needs to be consistent expectations every year. And I think that we've all sort of set like the baseline for Indiana is top 4 in the Big Ten every year. That's what we want to see is it, at least maybe if you finish 5th, you finish 5th, but you're aiming for top 4 in the Big Ten and a Sweet 16 berth. And after that, great, whatever happens, but you need to be those consistent expectations. So I haven't lowered expectations. It's just, it's hard to watch a team fail the same way every single time and not get better.
Yep.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to have to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We will talk to you again Saturday night after IU Nebraska. Until then,
take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out. All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Here I come, Mrs. Stansoni.
I feel so bad for Mrs. Tansoni tonight. Coach isn't here.
He's been in the chat, though.
Okay.
His whereabouts are accounted for.
Well, he's got a smartphone. He can run around and chase her with the texting.
Oh, man. Yeah. Now, what I will say, you might lower your projections. Like,
Sure.
Watching the team play may harm your confidence to the point where you don't think they're going to make the tournament. But the expectations, the standard has to be there. But I don't buy, I'll see this. I got into a conversation with some people about the Rutgers game where it's like, look, there's a path to lose this game and feel all right about it if a few certain things happen. No, I don't think those things happened. But, if you really compete, you're there at the end of the game, you play well, you see some progress. And it's like, being happy with a loss, should never be a thing for an Indiana fan. It's like, okay, well, there's a difference between being happy with a loss and being okay with it. It's like I know that we still want to hang on to we measure things by national championships, and certainly that has to be the path and the ultimate goal, but you also have to kind of meet the team where it's at. Otherwise, just check out until they're projected to be like a top 5 team, So, I think you got to be fair with what expectations you put on this team so you don't drive yourself insane and so you don't hop on Twitter after a loss and go apoplectic just because they lost a game. But if you have a fair standard, a fair expectation for them, then hold them to it. I think just make sure that it's an actual fair expectation for what this particular team can do. And then in the offseason, let's reassess whether the program is still on the right trajectory. That's how I look at it anyway.
That's fair.
Thank you. That was a very, very mild endorsement of my idea.
Andy, are you...
Wow.
It's fair. What do you want? What do you want me to throw a party over here? Because you...
No, I don't know.
No, I think look,
I want to win. I want to shoot well. Ryan just left.
Yeah, that's what you get. You
Okay,
shamed him into leaving. Who knew that was all it took? All these years.
All right.
All these years. That seemed fairly innocuous compared to the kinds of stuff we usually give him a hard time about.
We have to let him back in. Like when he comes, I have to promote him to panelist. So we could just do the rest of this ourselves.
Well, what fun would that be?
Yeah, I know. All right. Let's go through rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay, Daryl. Speaking of that last topic, when are we going to go out and get a top coach, not an up-and-coming one? When Billy Gillespie didn't work out at Kentucky, they got Calipari. Call Brad Stevens or whoever. So if you'd start drinking if you had Brad Stevens in your coach suggestion bingo board.
Mid-January, I'd say that's pretty good.
Yeah. What will it take for Indiana to get to that point? North Carolina would have got Roy Williams. Oh, man. I thought we were going to be able to do these questions on our own.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody. I'm back.
I definitely would not. I definitely would not consider this to be anywhere near the realm of Billy Gillespie scenario.
No,
for a variety of reasons. But
I kind of feel bad for even bringing this question up because it's, I don't
look. Even if you want Archie gone, folks, he's not leaving for another at least 2 years.
And it's I don't know.
He doesn't deserve that.
And it's too soon to make that final judgment. Like I don't.
Here's the thing: if he misses the tournament for the 3rd straight year, you can start talking about where the program is at. That's fair. But
and with some
now,
coaches, I think you do know 2.5 years in, you can know like this is not the right fit.
Yeah.
That's not the case yet. There's some evidence on the good side. There's some evidence on the bad side, maybe even more on that side, depending on your perspective. But I do think it's too soon to start having those conversations.
And look, again, I will say you missed the tournament 3 years in a row. The entire offseason is going to be, is Archie Miller the right guy at Indiana? And that inevitably that's going to be, because Indiana, you got to make the tournament. The amount of resources that get sunk into this program and into the facilities and all of that stuff and the recruiting budget and all that.
Yeah.
And the salaries of the coaches and stuff, you got to be making the tournament at the very least. And then after that, we'll consistently making the tournament. That was the issue with Tom Creed. You didn't make the tournament every year. You know, it's and then you'd have those ridiculous highs and ridiculous lows. That was why. So after 3 years of no tournament, it's fair to start asking the question. We're not there yet, though. Right now, what would Andy? They'd be like a 9 seed if the season ended today.
I had them as an 8 when I did mine on Tuesday, but they'd probably be a 9 given results of the week or something like that. I mean, Coach said in the chat they had them as their last 8 seed today. So yeah, they're right in that range. While everybody in the Big Ten is just beating the hell out of each other.
Yeah, and it's I think it was Andy Katz was talking about 12 of 14 Big Ten teams, if the season ended today, might be in the tournament. Like, I mean, that's insane. And so facing that all season and getting in is, going to be a tough task.
Yeah.
But you got to do it. You got to get in. Got to be in the dance.
Yep. Let's see, Patrick, how should we think about rooting for other teams in the Big Ten? Any teams we should want to lose based on record or just enjoy the slaughterhouse?
Purdue always.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Purdue. But, like, when everything is going to be so jumbled in the middle, I guess we won't really know that until later in the season, right? Once you start jockeying for Big Ten tournament seeding. Like, right now, I guess
start
if you're
familiarizing
Indiana,
yourself
just pray
with the
for carnage,
tiebreaker
right?
procedures now in the
what I would say is root for the home team to win every night right now.
Yes.
Because that makes Indiana's road losses look a lot better.
Yes.
Or not necessarily better, but it doesn't make them look as bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would ideally be. I mean, you got to feel like Nebraska and Northwestern are going to be the two that are really not in contention at this point. But you'd almost like to see another team go in the tank a little bit. It doesn't necessarily matter who it would be because everybody's pretty close. But
teams you beat probably you want to look good, right?
Yeah, that would help. I mean, Ohio State actually winning games at this point might be useful. But yeah, you'd kind of like to see. Can you get a couple other teams that you feel like you can actually get wins over based on, either how they really start to struggle or things like that. But yeah, I don't know that there's a clear answer to who you don't want to play well. I think the more everybody kind of beats up on each other and stays jumbled up, the less separation you're going to see in a lot of the metrics, which means that all the games as they are today are going to fall in those quad 1, quad 2 areas.
Jeffrey says, how does the get old, stay old adage work if you get nothing from your upperclassmen? Next season will be an exact copy of this because the only senior that you'll be able to count on is Joey. So what I would say to this is, there's a point that Indiana's upperclassmen aren't being consistent this year, but I think there's a pretty big difference between Devontae and Duran and Justin and Al. For all the issues that we have with Justin and Al, and they are inconsistent, and I think they do fall short as leaders in certain areas, those guys, you have a better idea what you're getting from them on a night-to-night basis than you do from Duran and Devontae. Like, I like those guys, have rooted for them. You've heard me on this show, predicting good things for those guys, and I've hoped beyond hope for those guys, but they just, they are who they are, and Duran's had issues with his body, and, Devontae has issues with just, bringing the same mentality to the game, but they're a special set of seniors. I mean, we haven't had 4-year seniors with this little to show for their career in terms of achievement and just in terms of discernible improvement and leadership in a long time. And it's hard to win that way. So I don't think all the leadership issues will get fixed next year, but I think Al and Justin will be better as seniors than the ones that we have this year, and you have to hope that now some of the classes that Archie has recruited, those guys are ready to step up and make the program theirs. Yep. And then it's just got to keep getting better. So I understand the question, especially looking at it this year, but I do think it'll be better next year. And then I think it just keeps building.
Here's the thing. I think in the offseason, they really need to bring in a grad transfer who has a good attitude and can shoot. Those are the two things
Yes.
I look at is like, do you have a good personality, like a hardworking person, like a Joey kind of guy who can shoot? I think that needs to be priority number one this offseason if they can find one. With the way the transfer portal works right now, everybody is in it. And there's tons of available guys, and you need to go find one and sell out to get him. Do whatever you got to do to get him.
Yeah, and again, like the questioner said, you'll have Joey Brunk next year, who will now be in his second year in the program, and that's a guy that you can count on as a leader. Like, he'll be in his second year, but I mean, it'll have felt, I think, like he's been here for 4 years.
Yeah,
at
least 3.
Yeah.
All right.
Andy, do you have anything to add on the leadership question?
No, you're good. We can hit a couple more, then I got to run.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Let's see. Let's skip that one. How do you feel about the 3-point line being backed up this season for the sport as a whole?
I think it's been fine. I haven't, noticed. I mean, I barely even noticed because we keep missing. So it doesn't.
Percentages
really
are definitely down.
I'd advocate for moving the line in and maybe make the like the restricted area, the arc for that. Maybe make that the 3-point line. For,
that might work. Trace Jackson Davis lead the nation in 3-point percentage.
The charge circle is the 3-point line now.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think it's
just for us though, not for everyone, just for us.
We said we thought numbers would be down a little bit, but guess what? Guys are going to adjust to it. They adjust to the NBA line when they go to the pros. I mean, they're going to adjust to it, and it'll be fine. I think it was right to move it back because I feel like the difference between the pro line and the college line was so much that, it kind of wasn't preparing guys as well for the next level. And let's face it, college basketball is kind of a factory for the NBA in some ways. And it's also, just the next level in general. And I think that at the higher levels, it is, Jerod. I'm sorry. It's the one and done. The reason why one and done is so popular with those big schools. So, but no, I think moving it back was fine too, because percentages were going up and up and up and up. And it's, make it a little more challenging. So it's not just an easy jumper. Going to the international line is fine. I think it's a fine distance.
Blasphemous.
It's true though. At the higher levels, it kind of is now.
Because this ain't about education.
There you go.
It sure as hell ain't much about basketball.
What was his name? Pete something?
Pete Bell.
Pete Bell. Thank you. I kept thinking Pete Dale, but that's Norman Dale. I'm sorry.
But you're really mixing your
I know
classic basketball movies
my girlfriend has never seen Hoosiers.
I think you're also mixing classic with by putting those two in the same vein.
Girlfriend's never seen
classic
Hoosiers.
basketball movies. Those are classic basketball movies.
I think Blue Chips is great.
One of them is a classic basketball movie.
Oh, Blue Chips is great.
They're both classics. I'm not saying they're of the same quality.
Shaq and Penny Hardaway are in one of them, and you're not calling it a classic?
And Ricky Rowe.
Matt Over, man.
Bags of cash.
Okay. Last question. This will be a good one to end on. This is from Sally. Is it public information what each Indiana coach's responsibility are? Ryan mentions on a regular basis to have someone come in and work on their shooting. Sally definitely paying attention to Ryan's rants. There are rules on who can have contact with the players, so who do you fire in order to bring someone new in? Sally's ready for blood here. She says, better not be Coach Roberts. Sally's ready to see heads roll. 1-2 for 19.
Coach is going to riot if Roberts would be the one to go.
No,
we can't have that.
Look, there are limits and stuff like that, but there's also support staff on staff that can work with players in off hours and things like that. There are official practice restrictions, but I mean, there's support staff, there's managers, there's whatever. If guys come in and are given a program to work on their shot and actually stick to it, they don't have to have the coach right there. Now, look, the coach can, having a coach present helps. But, having a program, bringing in video of your workout and showing it to the coach, be like, what's wrong? What can we do? I mean, there's ways to do it. And other schools don't, a lot of other schools don't struggle with this program, with this problem. So you have to understand that, look, maybe it's the players and they're just not good shooters, whatever. But when you're consistently seeing it over 3 years that nobody is standing out as a good knockdown shooter at Indiana, it tends to tell me that something there, just by the body of evidence, something there is wrong and not being addressed. And maybe it's in the first 2 years, they had to work on defense so much because they're installing this different system these guys don't know and all this with the pack line and changing that up. Then you got to focus on running offense as well because it's a brand new system and it's so different from what they had previously and all that. that maybe there just wasn't enough time for individual development. I don't know, but player development to me is as important as recruiting, because look, you're not always going to get the 5-star ready-made product recruit. You're going to get guys who you need to help reach their potential. And so player development has to be a huge part of a program. And it's not just about building their bodies and making them stronger and leaner and making sure they're eating right and all that. That's a huge part of it. But making them better at basketball skills also is a huge part of it as well. And so people talk about recruiting these guys. Well, player development is as important as recruiting, if not more important, because you can get the good player, but it's about making them a better player and taking them from where they are in high school, which is typically a really good lump of clay, and turning it into something, and developing it. So there are two sides of the same coin. You need great players, but you also need to develop those players, and you need to develop the players that you get that may not be a 4-star, 5-star guy. You're going to sometimes fill out your roster with a 3-star who has one really good skill. You got to develop the rest of his skills as well so he can be on the floor. I mean, if you get a 3-point shooter who can't play defense, what does it matter? If you don't develop him as a defender, you're just going to be getting a guy who shoots maybe 43% from 3, but then gives up a bucket on the other end half the time as well. So you've got to develop all their skills, and shooting is definitely one of those things.
I believe you just described James Blackman Jr.
I was going to say,
I wasn't going to say
that gentleman earlier in the show. Yeah.
In his defense, he hit a lot of threes. So on a lot of nights, he made up for it.
He did. It'd be great to have a shooter like that, but at the same time, back end problems when you're playing defense. So it's about developing every skill.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the first part of her question in terms of who's really tasked with.
I don't know either.
Well, here's what we do know is that when they first constructed the staff, Ed Schilling was the guy who was the player development guy, and that was kind of his thing. Bruiser Flint, more I think of a defensive type guy. Yeah. Obviously, the recruiting connections out east, which haven't really kind of borne fruit yet. I don't really know what Tom Ostrom does. I mean, I know he's Archie's right-hand man, and I think he's obviously...
What would you say you do here?
I mean, obviously he does a ton.
What is your day-to-day job like? What time do you show up in the morning?
I think he's obviously very instrumental, and maybe more than instrumental, in installing the pack line. But then we've talked a lot about defense now, so who's the offensive guy? And Roberts is known as a guy who's developed big men, but I don't know what his...
I don't know. I just don't
resume is outside of that, but I think that's that's kind of the basics of what we know. I mean, that was what Schilling was going to do. Basically bring in Keon Brooks and develop players, and we know how that went.
Even if there was a guy who was really tasked with working on the shooting, it's not like that guy's going to put his hand up right now and be like, "Oh yeah, that's me." So everybody just kind of takes a step back.
And Tom Ostrom obviously is big time in recruiting, which I knew that. I'm just talking about what actual game.
Yeah, because they all have certain things they're supposed to do.
And Bruiser and Mike Roberts seem to alternate the scouts because you'll see them do the little scouting reports before the games. So I don't know. We need someone's got to be there for shooting. Need to be better at shooting.
We do need to be better at shooting. That's really deep and a really good way to go out tonight, guys.
It's true. It's just so sad. I mean,
I know.
Just make shots, guys. Let's just
please. What do I have to do? Please, just.
We're at the bargaining stage now.
Yeah,
we're past anger. We've soon we'll be at acceptance, and then just be.
Not sure the fan base is going to get to acceptance.
No, it'll never happen.
I think we're going to stall out at anger, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Look, against Rutgers, I thought the defense was much better, and I thought the effort was good. You got to hit shots, man. We used to go nuts when Tom Crean would say that. You got to make shots.
I mean, and
at some level,
it's a make or miss league, some would say.
I mean, it is. Look, you should be able to bring a certain level of effort every night.
Yeah.
But there is an extra level of enthusiasm and effort you get when you're playing basketball when you're making shots. Like that.
Agreed. It just
you can't excuse
extra
total lack of it.
Well, you see it with Devontae.
You
see it with Devontae every time when he's locked in. The effort he provides on both ends is like, oh, that's a different player, and when he's struggling, I mean, he may still make boneheaded passes and things like that when he's locked in, but he plays so much better on both ends.
Joel's fix is that we need a strength coach that taunts opposing players.
I miss him. Was his
What,
name?
Joel? He's right here in the chat.
No. What was his name? The Lionel
Yes, Lionel
Anderson.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I was about to say Richie. That definitely was wrong.
Or
Yeah,
Lionel Richie.
Anderson.
That might be soothing to everybody and make everybody feel good.
All right, I gotta get out of here, boys.
That's a great note to end on for this.
Absolutely.
Disaster of a show. Okay.
All right, cool.
All right, I thought this was one of our best, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about shooting.
Yeah. So it's 3 of us Saturday, right?
Yeah,
yes,
it
it
is
is 3 of us.
What time's tip is?
7 p.m. Eastern, 4 your
4
time.
here. Oh, geez, I'm supposed to go to dinner that night.
Oh boy.
I'll work on it.
Okay.
I have a family. My cousin's wife is in town to run a marathon, and we're having dinner Saturday night. But I don't, we'll see.
Okay.
Who cares about family?
Hope he's not watching the show.
No, he's not going to be here, and my cousin's not actually coming. His wife's coming out to run a marathon. Yeah. Interesting. So Mama D is cooking, so it's like kind of hard to miss out on that.
That is true.
It's tough. It's a tough one. All right, I'll figure it out. I'll let you guys.
We'll
know.
figure it out.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Sounds good. Later,
We'll figure it
guys.
out. All right, everybody. See you on Saturday.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Later.